أهلا بكم. هنالك العديد من التجارب التي تستحق أن نطلع عليها وأن نشاركها، كونها تجارب ملهمة، خصوصا فيما يتعلق بالتعليم الدامج من أجل مستقبل أبنائنا. اليوم نستعرض تجربة ولاية نيو برنزويك بكندا من وزير التعليم السابق بهذه الولاية، السيد جودي كار. Your Excellency, welcome to Sharjah and welcome to our show. And speaking of Sharjah, as a keynote speaker at the We Are Inclusion 2025 conference in Sharjah, what key objectives do you feel were achieved, especially given that it was the first time or the first edition in the Middle East and North Africa?
The objectives, first, thank you very much for such a
You're
welcome
welcome.
here in Sharjah. What a beautiful state, a beautiful country. The objectives of the conference around the world was to highlight the progress in Sharjah, highlight the progress in the UAE of including people with intellectual differences, intellectual disabilities. And our objective was to hear from people that are affected directly across the world of being excluded, and also examples of being included. And how can we all work together more to initiate policies and programs so that every individual can reach their fullest potential like everyone else? People with intellectual disabilities came to the conference to speak and to share. And a big highlight was seeing again from Sheikh Sultan bin Mohammed al-Qasimi the priority of inclusive education, the priority of his people, His Highness here in Sharjah. The progress has been great, and it gives us a chance to reflect and say, how can we work together to keep moving forward for greatness?
Yeah. As a former Minister of Education, what core messages or message did you aim to deliver through your participation in the conference?
Well, I was a Minister of Education in Canada, New Brunswick, and elected for 19 years. And after politics, I became a lawyer. And my focus had been on inclusive education,
Mhm.
where we moved children from special classrooms and special schools into regular classrooms and regular schools. And so the experience that I had through those years, I was able to share at the conference, and also learn that most every country has the same objective for education: to educate our children and become a better society, a productive society.
Right.
And the research shows that inclusive education, where all children learn together in the same classroom, is a modern, dynamic, new way of teaching, so that children that learn together learn to live together in society.
Mhm.
And it starts in education. And here at Sharjah, working with the Sharjah City Humanitarian Services, they co-hosted the conference, and the mission is a better community. And being able to share that experience of some of the things I did to transition, maybe some learnings from that as well that we can avoid in other places potentially as we move forward.
Yeah. How did Canada's experience with inclusive education enrich the discussions and provide practical, transferable solutions for the region?
Right. What I learned was it's very important when transitioning and having all children move from special classrooms. I closed our special classrooms for children with disabilities and integrated into the regular classrooms. What I learned was we needed to co-plan and co-implement as partners with teachers, with families, and with the educational leaders and government officials. All had to work together. And we had to learn that it wasn't just closing special schools and special classrooms and moving kids in the regular classroom. We were actually changing the way education is done in the regular school too. So the traditional ways of teaching had to change, and our mindsets had to change, that we were actually changing both systems and merging into a new, holistic, dynamic 21st century education where all children have differences. And the magic of learning in the classroom, you can't put a label just on one label just on a
That's
child.
right.
You have so many differences, but the value that we learned was that when you can see that when it's successful, children of all types
Mm,
learn better and are accepting. What also is very, very key is supporting the classroom teacher.
mhm.
That is essential. Essential is supporting the classroom teacher, because even today, without any change, the classroom teacher is overwhelmed with the challenges of the classroom. There's so many differences now for children, and then you add more children in. So we have to really make sure we support the classroom teacher. And that was a big learning, but also learned that that's a common challenge across the world.
Mm,
Is how do we meet the diverse needs of a classroom of the 21st century, and also make sure it's evidence-based, it's pedagogically sound, and that it's effective for learning. And that's what inclusive education is.
right. What were the main challenges you faced back home in Canada when implementing inclusive education policies, and how could Arab countries adapt those lessons to their own contexts?
A big challenge is understanding and awareness. And another challenge is it's not just a one-time policy
Mm,
or a one-time initiative and then you move to something else. It truly inclusive education transition has to be ongoing and intentional, because we're changing decades of years of old ways of teaching into a new system. So you have
right.
to be intentional from the top to down to the classroom of how to implement um, inclusive education. And the biggest challenges was fear from parents with children with disabilities, and fear from parents of the children that didn't have an observable disability,
Right.
fear from teachers as well, teachers in special schools and teachers in the regular classrooms. And what I think was important is to say we're all unsure, but we know we have to change to meet the needs of all of our children in a equitable and quality education. So let's work together. And you have to build the structure so you're co-planning and co-implementing from the ministerial departmental level right to the classroom school level. That means having parents together on committee, having teachers on committee, and having departmental district educational leaders on the committee to work together at planning and support. We have a co-implementation team at the high level.
Mhm.
And at the school level, the principal is given a structure where they have a support team together. They have a committee where they work with the teacher and learn and communicate and try new strategies together. So it's a shared support model for teachers.
Mm. That's impressive. Did you observe any notable cultural or social differences between Canada and the Arab region that shape how inclusion is implemented?
Absolutely, there's no difference. What's so fascinating about the work I've been able to do across the world um, is really come to realize we're one small world
Yeah,
together facing the same challenges. And yes, we have cultural difference and language and food, but our goal is the same when we want to educate our children. And our challenges are the same in terms of how do we do it? Yes, most say we believe in inclusive education, but it can't be done, or it's too hard, or there's no, but we can do it. And what I've learned is that there's absolutely no difference in the objectives
mm,
and the journey that we're on in the transition. And that's where we can learn from each other and help support that goal that Sharjah, Emirate, and the UAE has signed on with Canada, and over 200 countries signed on to the Convention of the Rights of the Persons with Disabilities.
mhm.
And His Highness Sheikh Sultan bin Muhammad Al-Qasimi has a new legislation, a new policy for inclusive education. The commitment is clear and strong. It always is, well, how do we get there? And getting there needs to be intentional with plans and communication and collaboration. And there's been great progress, but we know we can do more. And that's what drives us, because I've seen the difference that an inclusive classroom can make for children, not just children with disabilities, but I've seen that the children without disabilities are more accepting. They're helping their friends and their neighbors. We have classrooms where all the children from that neighborhood goes to the same school. They're siblings. They can look out for each other. And we've seen where we have a better humanity.
Right.
Because then when these children finish school and become employers or employees, they're hiring people with disabilities now.
Yeah.
And because it's also a need for labor, and you see that we share that same common goal. It's not just a good thing to do or a charitable thing. It's actually the right thing to do financially, educationally, and socially.
Right. I think also when you just make the children around the world more aware of inclusive education, and when you include the children with disabilities with the children with no disabilities, I think the awareness will raise also.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And that's what we saw in New Brunswick,
And
Canada.
that's a purpose.
That's the purpose,
Yeah.
is that, when we put people in boxes and silos and labels, and we start at a very early young age, their lifetime is that. It's their expectations are lower
Right.
in this box, and that's all you can do. But all children want the same thing, is to dream big, to be included, to belong, and to learn. And people learn differently. And it's the challenge is supporting the classroom teacher in how to do that. You can't just say, oh, all the kids are now here, there you go. You have to really be there together,
Right.
to have training, to have implementation teams, to support problems where there's some issues. You've got to be flexible with budgeting and funding, but you really have to be committed from the leadership of the top to say, we're going to move in this direction. I believe Sharjah is positioned. We know that Sharjah is the education emirate of the UAE.
That's right.
And I believe we can be even more the best in the UAE as an example of this inclusive practice that meets the 21st century dynamics of learning, inclusive or universal design for learning, for support. The way that we learn in classrooms is different today than it was 20 years ago. And it's exciting when you see the benefit. And that's why what really encouraged me in my journey in politics was going to schools and classrooms and seeing how it works. And seeing that it's possible. I didn't understand how could it work when you have someone with, let's say, an intellectual ability, and I don't like this, but let's say they're at a grade 2 level, but they're in a grade 7 class. How does that work? When you're teaching math, it's not possible, but it is possible. And when you see it, and you see how the teacher is able to accommodate different levels of learning in the same classroom, it's magical. And now we have children with intellectual disabilities graduating on stage with their peers in the same graduation ceremony. They're getting the same certificate that says as an achievement. And that drives me to say, if we can do it for one school or one child, we can do it for all.
Right.
We have a long ways to go in Canada as well. All across the world, there's a threat to continue that keeps pushing back in some countries, a threat to go to the old way, because that's what we're used to. And we have to be a strong resolve to say, we know it's better this way. Let's keep going.
Yeah. In what ways did the conference act as a launchpad for sustained collaboration between Canadian and Arab institutions focused on international disability inclusion?
What ways would be similar to what I mentioned, was that the concerns, the challenges, the fears are the same with families that want inclusive education to be transitioned quicker, but they feel sometimes the departmental leaders or the government doesn't listen, or they say they want to do inclusive education, but we're not moving farther and faster in that direction. There's probably a lot of roadblocks and barriers to move in that direction. It does take conviction and strength in leadership from the top down to the classroom. And it's a awakening to say again that we're in this together. It's a right, or it's a recognized by states and countries under the Convention of the Rights of Persons. And it's not just a good thing to do or charitable. It really is financially good to do. It's very much educationally good to go with inclusive education, and socially. So there are the research and the reasons why. Financially, you're often putting resources into two systems, a special education system and a regular school system. So by merging those two systems into one integrated system where all education support is integrated and coordinated for the student in the classroom, you're going to spend your dollars more efficiently as a government. That's what I enjoyed as Minister of Education when my Premier said, you have to do better with your money. Well, let's do better by coordinating and integrating that service. Educationally, the results across the world, the research says that children with disabilities do learn better in mixed ability classrooms because they're pushed higher with the possibilities of what they can learn, and their peers, their friends help them. And so they're learning more. The research also says the regular students, quote unquote, because there's no regular student anymore, but the other students do not suffer from their education. Those that will learn are vibrant and will learn. But what the third component is the socially benefits to the non-disabled students and the disabled students, to have connections, to have friends, to feel good. So all of those reasons, again, are highlighted in the conference. We Are Inclusion with the Sharjah City Humanitarian Services and their mandate to partner with our governments in the city and the state to keep working at improving inclusive education.
What is your vision for the future of inclusive education in the region, in the Arab region, following this conference?
My vision and hope is we have a great starting point. Sharjah, Emirates, under His Highness Sheikh Sultan bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi, and the policies of government have stated clearly they want inclusive education. So the starting point gives hope. The conference and learning from the officials is that we're in a great position here to move to the next steps. And my vision would be a team created that is a council or a committee, an advisory that puts parents and teachers and the education department officials together to co-plan the next steps. Ideally, you would have a plan, a 3-year plan specific on how do we keep moving forward? What are the initiatives we need to embed this practice? And then co-implement. So have a co-planning team and a co-implementation team from the department down to the school level and district level to really say specifically how can we move forward with training, with awareness, with transitioning, and support for the classroom teacher, how to set up school teams that have support teams for the teacher, how to just work on it going forward. So that is really I believe a vision to say let's be intentional, because the everyday work keeps happening, and for the officials to keep working on their everyday work and try to transition to a new system, it's monumental. As I said, you're taking a special education system and the regular system and you're merging them into a new one holistic system. It takes dedicated, intentional efforts with benchmarks and reporting back to our stakeholders, working together. So that's a big, I think, a vision that I'd like to see as next steps.
Yeah, so now back to your career in Canada, what pivotal moment led you to champion inclusive education early in your political career?
When when I myself was able to see what it meant for inclusive education, it's back to the understanding and awareness. When I was convinced this was the way to go, I was able to see how teachers are supported in the school. With existing teachers, they themselves set up a committee with the leadership of the principal. So it's not really new people. It's the existing team working together to problem solve, to say it's okay if we don't know what we're supposed to do, but they meet with the parents and the other parents. So when I saw it, like one boy I saw would go to school at grade 5 level, did not know how to ride a bicycle, and his dream was to ride a bicycle like his friends, and it was his friends that taught him how to ride the bicycle. And this was grade 5. He should have learned to ride the bike before, but he saw his friends, and his friends helped him. And then he had the courage. And so when I saw that, it's like, oh, it's amazing what kids can do. And when we let
Right.
kids be kids and learn together, there's so much that can be accomplished. So that was a pivotal moment. And that was early before I became minister. Then my wife and she is the CEO of Inclusion Canada, which is a family organization like Inclusion International. And together we have a passion of supporting people with intellectual disabilities. And through her work, I've been able to see more examples. Also, as a politician at the local level, parents would come to me that wanted support, that had problems with their schools. And I was able to see that, in the morning, the child would be sent home because there was behavior. Or, I saw that they couldn't go on the field trip because there wasn't the class trip because there wasn't an extra teacher. I saw that just so many examples of discrimination. When I became minister, my premier said, let's improve inclusive education. And that's where I was able to really put a plan in place, working with parents and teachers to improve our practices. And I think that goes with everywhere I've seen in the world, that there's some really good practice and there's some practices that need to be improved upon. And how do we make it so that there's more good practice? And so those were some pivotal moments in my early times of saying, once I knew and believed and saw, then I wanted it for every child. And I still feel that passion today.
How did your role as New Brunswick Minister of Education enable you to advance an inclusive education policy?
It made the whole difference. I was in the position where I could make a difference. When I got involved with politics and being elected to make a difference. And it's easy in any position of leadership to do nothing. It's easy to just, because no matter, when you're a person of action, there are some people that aren't happy. So it's easy to do nothing, but that's not why we're here on this world, is to sit steady. It's to make a change and make a difference. So I was in the minister's position to have a plan, to put together a plan to enact a new policy. We didn't have the policy. So we had signed on to the Convention of the Rights of Children with Disabilities, but had legislation to a degree. We had a transition, but not to where we needed to be. So I was able to mandate that we have a policy that met the human rights framework of the convention. And I was able to direct resources from existing resources to integrate support services in our schools, to coordinate between other government departments, because there's only so much money in budgets, and we have to utilize existing funds effectively. And I was able to ask for more funds, but I had to have them targeted and show that it's going to make a difference. Able to change policy for teaching, for principals of schools. When we appoint principals to be a leader of a school, there was learning criteria, modules that were needed. I made sure that one of those modules were mandatory inclusive education, as an example. So it changes your whole ability, and we need more champions at all levels. But what I've also learned is that a teacher in a classroom doesn't have to wait for the Minister of Education. A principal of a school doesn't need to wait for Minister of Education. In fact, we have examples where those teachers and those principals initiated inclusive education with their own tenacity and with their own advocacy.
Amazing.
And it didn't take someone saying, yes, go. I mean, we had legislation, so it doesn't stop people from making their school more inclusive when they have the leadership and they have the framework. So His Highness Sheikh Sultan bin Mohammed Al-Qasimi has said inclusive education is a priority. He's giving permission to our schools to enact. So at the city level, the district, the school level, we can do more if we want. And if we want, we can put the teams together and make it happen. I've seen that happen with or without funding, with or without policy specific, with or without direction. If it's the right thing to do and you put a plan in place and communicate with families and teachers, you can make it happen.
So was it easy to change mentalities, especially with working with parents and small communities?
It's hard. It's hard work. It's hard to change minds, to change mindset. We know parents of children without disabilities. We have a hard time letting go of our children. We have a hard time. We want to protect our children. Parents of children with disabilities, even more so, want to protect their children. And
Right.
sometimes when children with disabilities go to mainstream society, they can be subject to bullying, the discrimination. And so often people will say, oh, inclusion doesn't work. Inclusive education doesn't work because you will find an example. You could Google New Brunswick, Canada, and see that we still have lots of challenge. It's not perfect. We're far from it. You will find pockets of discrimination and pockets of negativity, and you'll find examples where inclusive education wasn't working and isn't working. And so we still have that same journey, because I think as we push for human rights or equality or ways of learning, we're countering like 200 years, 100 years, decades of old ways of doing. And the natural reaction is to revert back to the old ways of what we're comfortable with and what we know. Doesn't mean that it's the best way. So it's taken like decades in New Brunswick and Canada to keep moving forward. And that's a challenge. There's still, you will see comments, people have right now in our world, people are quick to talk down about other people in general, regardless of differences. And it's incumbent upon all of us to try to be kind or to be more loving and to give the rights to all to succeed. So we have to understand where people are at, but we have to be tenacious and have conviction to move forward as well. And I think that it takes a lot of courage on all of our parts to keep moving in that
Right.
direction.
To step out of the comfort zone as well for all of us,
Yes.
for all people.
Yes.
How did you navigate political and union-related challenges during implementation?
I navigated those very carefully. It's resistance. Change, in the face of change, you have resistance, and you've seen that in all types of movements of change. It's because of fear and prejudice, differences, lack of understanding. And so it's hard because you want to see things improve, and so it becomes a push-pull. How far can you push without getting into trouble, and then pulling back a little and working towards the right direction? When you're convicted on the values and the goal, then how to get there, you navigate through. And my colleagues in cabinet, you have to convince that this is the right way to go sometimes. It really helped to have the support of the premier, the head of the government, that said, this is a mandate. So when other people were questioning, I could say I had the support of the premier. The other thing that helped is the Convention on the Rights of Children with Disabilities that we signed on to as a country in Canada, and in UAE has signed on a lot of other countries. When I could see that other countries were moving in that direction, it helped. like Portugal was an example. Other countries are moving, but there's not a lot of places where you can see intentional effort of really pushing this forward. But when you do see it, it helps. So that's how you handle. I think you have to handle it carefully and with a 2 to 3 year plan, and then revise that plan and keep moving in that direction.
Now I can see why did you call it a journey, not a system, because a system is an old system. You need to break the wheel so you get through this journey with all the challenges and obstacles, and you just accept them
Yes.
and you go on
Yes.
this journey, right?
Yes. And you say that, I say that because we're no different. I still say it's not a magical. It was funny when I was minister, and there are a lot of people. No, we can't do it. There's excuses like you can't. Oh, it's too. No, they're different. Well, that happened different in that school. So I'm like, okay, well, why in this one school it works really well, but then down the road
Our school.
there's another school. No, can't do that. I said, well, are you drinking different water? What's the difference? Well, the difference is your conviction and leadership and support, and
Dedication.
the dedication, and to say, look, if we agree that this is where we want to go, then let's put a plan in place and make it happen. That's joyful to see when we get to that point.
Do you have like indicators, performance indicators you can share with us?
Yes, like the important indicators would be the achievement of children with disabilities. How many are in school? How many have completed school? How many children with disabilities are now in college or in the workplace? So we track that. There's some great success from where we were before. The expectations of children with disabilities were that they were always at home. They were put in institutions. They were shunned away. But the results have changed where now it's expected that children will be at the regular school, and it's expected more and more that they will have a life after school, which is a real job with real pay, and that they will be going to college or getting married. We have people with intellectual disabilities getting married. I saw a picture on Facebook. A student in grade 12 in my local school has a girlfriend, and she has a disability, but they did the pictures of their prom, and one picture where they have their hat in front of them having a kiss, and they're going. There's more and more of people that are having a happy life, and shouldn't we all be allowed to have a happy life of success, of relationships, of education, and of a future? So people with intellectual disabilities, you learn, are no different than anyone else in that way. We just need to do things differently. We can't just fit children into the schools.
Yeah.
We have to change the school, and the school needs to be changed for all the kids. Because if you don't have a diagnosis or a label, you do have something. You have stress, you have anxiety, you have learning disability, you have reading disability. No one child is perfect. And so we have to understand that as a society. And when we learn together in the classroom, we learn together as adults to live together in the workplace and the community.
Right.
The other indicators, so those would be some indicators. The other ones would be, where are the children? So are you are you still in a special classroom? Are you in a special school, a special classroom? Are you in a regular school but in a special classroom? Are you in the regular classroom as an inclusive classroom? So tracking those numbers, you can then say, okay, we're improving our inclusive practices. Those are other important indicators.
Right. Which international models or cases most inspired your policy design?
Well, really, trying to stay modest. But where I'm from, New Brunswick, it's one of the leaders in the world. And it's hard because you say, well, we're better than everyone. No, we're not. We had a different path, and the different path was because we're a smaller state in Canada. We are one of 13, 14 provinces and territories and states. So we have not as much resources as some of the bigger centers in our country. Our results for education are on the lower end of the rest of the country, and they have always been. because of our demographics and our resources. But so when we came along in the 80s, when there was a decision to include and support children with disabilities, we didn't have the money to build new special schools and new big structures. And we had a province that was spread out of geography, of people lived. So we had to learn together. Like, it was a more community decision. And so I think that helped us move on our path to be the world leaders of how we teach children in the same in the same classrooms. Other examples would be Portugal is one that's more recent in the last few years. And then there would be pockets of places where there's good work happening. But there aren't a lot of exceptional places where there's exceptional results. And my dream would be for Sharjah to be that, not only in the Middle East, but worldwide, but in the Middle East to be the most inclusive education system. And we can say across the world that that's the place where people can go to see how it works. We have people all over the world coming to New Brunswick in my province to see how it works. And it's amazing. But I also make sure to let people know we're not perfect. And there's a big challenge, but
you put an effort.
Yes.
Yeah, for decades.
Yes. Yeah.
That's impressive.
Start one step.
No.
Start with one
Right.
step.
How can we balance the individual needs of students with disabilities with national curriculum requirements, in your opinion?
Well, we balance that by having one curriculum, and then that one curriculum gets adapted as needed for children with disabilities. So in some countries, they have a curriculum for children with visual impairment, a curriculum for children with intellectual disabilities, a curriculum for each child, and then they have the regular curriculum. But what you have to do is look at it differently and say you have one standard, one curriculum, and every child can be modified or adapted. The curriculum can be adapted for every child based on where they're at. Sometimes in classrooms, you have really bright, excelling children that excel. Well, they need to have adaptation just as much as the child that maybe has some struggles or challenges. So we have changed it where our structures and silos would be what's good for one child is good for all children. It's adjusting and changing the structure around as well. Education support is changed where it's now not just special education over here for some kids and other support over here. It's integrated into one education support for all children, and all children have differences. So it's trying to meet the needs of all children and getting away from your boxes, because we could have the number of boxes could be what we have for the number of children. So it's just not sustainable to go in that direction any longer. We have to, for the purposes of utilizing our resources and being more effective, is to change the way we do things. We have to do that today, now, regardless of whether more children are coming to the system. So it's being effective and strategic. At the same time, being much of a challenge to resist change.
Right. As a minister, what was the toughest decision you made or you had to make to sustain inclusion over time?
That's a really hard, tough question, because I found it tough to navigate pushback, but the toughest decision is when, it's when parents want more service, but I never found it to be tough. I found it to be my job. My job especially was to support the most marginalized students. The OECD has said, the economic development research across the world has said that those countries in the world that close the gap between the most vulnerable marginalized with the higher achievers, when that gap is closed as a society and everyone moves up, then you have a more productive, economically vibrant economy. So my focus has been more on the marginalized and making sure that they have opportunity, because when they have opportunity and succeed, our whole country succeeds in productivity. And So the toughest thing would be not doing enough in the opportunities at the time that I had. I think I accomplished a lot, but more could be done. And so I continue to advocate in New Brunswick and across the world to move in that direction. It's my job. It's our job as educational leaders, as leaders in any sector, to meet the needs of our children. And I thrive in those type of challenges because it is the right thing to do for children, and it's the right thing to do for our economies. And there's so much potential to keep moving. And that's why I'm excited about Sharjah, because it's the educational capital of the UAE, and there's lots of potential to keep seeing the results of that inclusive education.
That's right. You said that you are a lawyer.
Yes.
How did your later legal experience strengthen your advocacy for inclusive education?
I got elected in politics when I was 23 and after my first degree. And after 15 years of being elected and being a minister, I was then in what's called the minority government or the opposition. And in my last 3 years of parliament, I went to law school at the same time to get my law degree. And then I didn't run again in politics. In 18, I became a lawyer. And using that skill or that opportunity, I researched the legal framework around a human rights or a legal framework around inclusive education. I helped develop 12 essential components of legislation and policy for inclusive education that meets the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So it became not only an advocacy, but a legal fundamental framework that I studied and worked with Inclusion Canada to develop the 12 essential elements. And that, I think, also has allowed me to navigate, and when I point out discrimination or wrong decisions for children, I can help them help make the arguments that the school system is obligated under law to support all children. When a law says that every child has the right to access regular schools, we have to make sure that that actually gets implemented. And it's great to have laws on paper, which I support, but we have to actually put the actions in place to make sure it's implemented. And having a law degree and being a lawyer helps with that legal framework and persuasion.
We have 5 minutes. So what's the most important thing you want to talk about?
The most important point would be is that we have to work together. We have a vision of inclusive education. Most countries have signed on to Article 24 and inclusive. Most countries have signed on, like Sharjah in the UAE, all across the world. We have Inclusion International, a framework of parents working with parents at the Sharjah City Humanitarian Services that support children with disabilities. They work closely with mainstream and regular schools and services. And so the goal is, let's keep going. Let's put specific plans in place, and it's possible. When you see one school, one state, one country moving, it's possible. And I want to see places like Sharjah be that beacon of hope and example for the Middle East and for the world, that inclusive, real, true inclusive education can happen and will be successful.
We hope so too.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for being here with us. Thank you for sharing this amazing journey, or this amazing journey of yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shukran. It's my pleasure. This is my 4th visit, and I'm amazed each time to see the kindness, the generosity, and the willingness to support education, economy, and socially a vibrant country. And I'm looking forward to the great things to happen in the years to come here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. شكرا لكم مشاهدينا أو متابعينا على متابعة هذه الحلقة. إلى اللقاء.